What if your thyroid isn't perfectly working just because you're not getting enough of the nutrients for it to function, or you're not digesting those? In this video, it's much longer, in-depth video, I'm going to go through the second part of my Mastering Thyroid and Adrenal Wellness seminar, just to give everybody an overarching view of all of the things that are required for your body to truly be functioning. And keep asking that question. If I am taking a thyroid medication, have I received this message that perhaps my body didn't get all of these nutrients to make it on its own? And can I use this as an opportunity to make sure that my body is getting everything? Because there's a lot of things going on in the body all the time. We want to make sure that if you are replacing that, those deficiencies aren't going to turn up as a problem somewhere else. And so we're going to go through this pretty deeply in an overarching way, not quite as much as when I'm teaching a seminar, but just to give you all these constant questions to say, well, what if? What if I'm actually dismissing this nutrient or that nutrient? Or what if I'm not actually digesting it? And that's a big piece for this. And I want to show you the book that I give every new person who comes in. It's called Why Stomach Acid Is Good for You by Dr. Jonathan Wright. And I'm going to touch on this a little bit in this because that's a big key to the digestion. And that could be the piece that everyone needs to re-examine for their overall health. So I'm going to go through this now at the request of those practitioners who've been to the seminars, just to give it a little more depth and complete reminder. So bear with me. This is a little different for me to be going through this without having live people to talk to. So it's going to be a slightly different presentation what I normally do, because I usually ask a lot of questions. But again, I want to make sure that everybody just has access to this train of thought. And I always started out by putting all these words up there and asking everybody, well, what do all of these have in common? And most people say right away, well, inflammation. Well, yes, there's probably an inflammatory component to all of this, but what's causing that inflammation? What's at the root of this? And I did finally, in the last time I taught this, somebody did say digestion. I thought, well, quite possibly, right? That could very well be it. But also, I want to point out to everybody who's watching this right now, these are not conditions that were recognized maybe 100 years ago only. And so is it that our bodies are just failing us and there is something wrong with us? Or is it the environment in which we live that has changed so much in the last 100 years that is causing our body to have to compensate and respond with what we're looking at here as a disease state? And is that just the result of external stressors? And what can we do about it is always the question. And in order for our body to do anything about anything, we need certain nutrients to rebuild. In fact, our body is replacing somewhere around 330 billion cells every single day. And in order for us to replace those cells, we have to have something come in to rebuild them and make new ones. And those things are what we call the building blocks of life, these little Legos that come together to make muscle, to make your teeth, to make your bones, to make your skin, to give you enzymes, to give you everything in your body has to have these things to make it. And they're called amino acids. Okay, these are the basic building blocks of life. And there are certain ones that are essential, and those are conditionally essential and non-essential. I point this out to say, look, if we're going to do any healing in the body, we have to have an abundance of these essential amino acids to rebuild the new whatever you want to rebuild or make something. In fact, your thyroid hormone is made from one of these called tyrosine down here. The T in T4 stands for tyrosine. Now, that's a conditionally essential amino acid. Your body can actually make this from phenylalanine, but you need some chemistry to make that happen. And in fact, all of this chemistry I'm talking about is something we have to bring in through our diet. So our diet is so much more important than we really think about on a daily basis. But we hear a lot about protein being an important piece because we have to have the valine, the tryptophan, the threonine, the phenylalanine, the methionine. All of these are essential, meaning we cannot make them in the body. We have to get them from an external source. So what do we get them from? Of course, we get them from proteins. I just said that. These are the favorite proteins I talk about a lot. I really love to steer people towards black beans, especially. They're really highly regarded in the blue zones around the world. They give you a lot of protein. Pumpkin seeds are another great source of protein. Nuts and seeds. Now, these aren't the only sources, but these are some of the best. And of course, red meat is a great source of protein. And here's the thing. Most people think all you have to do is take this protein, put it in your mouth, get it in your stomach, and magic, abracadabra, boom, you get all these muscles. because that's what muscle's made from, is protein. Well, and that's what I guess is important to know, that if you are trying to build muscle, if you're trying to lift weights, if you're a bodybuilder, you need to have lots of muscle to build that protein. But let's not forget, we need it for everything else in our body. And so this is where I ask the question, how many of you are completely confident that every time you put protein in your mouth, that it ends up as amino acids for your body to totally build protein? And this is the question that I think we should be asking a lot more of. I'm reminded right now of a gentleman who I work with, who is a physique model, and he's building lots of muscle. He works out 2 hours at a time, 3 days a week. And he was just not getting the results because I think we went to check in and make sure that he had enough enzymes to break down the protein that he was eating. He's eating tons of protein, but not getting the results. So this is pepsin. Pepsin is the prima donna, as I call it, of protein digestion, because you have to have these perfect conditions for it to really be there in your body. But what's important to know about pepsin is that it is the most efficient in cleaving the peptide bonds between the hydrophobic and aromatic amino acids, such as phenylalanine, tryptophan, and tyrosine. Meaning, if we are eating proteins, in order to break that down into the amino acids, we have to have pepsin to make that breakdown for us. Now, interestingly enough, enzymes are also made from amino acids, just to kind of blow your mind a little bit as to how that all goes. And here's the thing about pepsin. And I said that it has to be a particular condition for it to come out and work. In fact, there has to be a level of acid in the body, in the stomach specifically, for pepsin to work. In fact, your stomach creates something called hydrochloric acid. It's incredibly acidic. It's 0.8. And let's just take a second and marvel at the human body here, that we create something that is so incredibly acidic that if you put it like on your computer, it would eat right through it. But somehow we're able to maintain it in our stomach. And without that acid, pepsin will not work. Once we get over a pH of about a 4, pepsin is just not functioning very well. Now, the interesting thing to note here is that in order for our body to balance pH, whether we're too acid or too alkaline, we need to have minerals. You can have alkaline ash minerals and acid ash minerals, and our body balances out using those. But we can't extract those minerals unless we have an acidic stomach. So you hear people say, well, alkalize or die, you're overly acidic. Well, that's not entirely accurate. In order to alkalize your body, you have to acidify the gut. And you have to have the minerals to do that. And so there's that great book I said, Why Stomach Acid is Good for You. And that's why I'm going to get into that now, because so many people are struggling with, heartburn, indigestion, reflux, GERD, and they think it's because they have too much acid, but that might not actually be the case. And right here in the middle is neutral. Remember, this is what water is. Water is exactly in the middle. And I think that's very interesting to note on our planet. So a lot of people out there are taking things like collagen. And maybe you're watching this right now, you're taking collagen. There's over 4 billion in 2018 dollars worth of collagen being sold. Well, the reason I bring that up is because, again, let me tell you why pepsin's important. Pepsin is capable of digesting essentially all the different types of proteins in the diet. And one of the most important features of pepsin digestion is its ability to digest collagen. So if you're taking collagen, you need to have pepsin to break it down and make it any use to you at all. It's an albuminoid that is affected little by other digestive enzymes. Collagen is a major constituent of the intercellular connective tissue of meats. And for the digestive enzymes of the digestive tract to penetrate the meat and digest the cellular protein, it is first necessary that the collagen fibers be digested, okay? So let's just take a second here. That was Guyton's physiology, so I think most people would agree that that's accurate. If you are going to make collagen in your body, you can't just put collagen in and then expect that collagen to replace the collagen that you need. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. You actually have to take that collagen, break it down into its little pieces, and then your body sends those little pieces to where it wants to repair collagen in the body. Those are the amino acids. But there's also vitamins and proteins. You have to have lots of vitamin C. There are a lot of things you need to make your own collagen. So maybe taking collagen in gives you those pieces to build collagen, but you have to break that collagen down first. Please remember that. So when we get into the things that are slowing your body down from being able to digest protein, remember that collagen is a protein, and you might need to focus on making sure that you are digesting it. Okay. Now, here's why else we need that stomach acid as we're talking about it. It's not just to make pepsin be available for us to break down protein. It also actually triggers the closure of the lower esophageal sphincter. That is this little muscle here at the top of the stomach and at the bottom of the esophagus that close so that we do not have acid coming back up into the esophagus. So this is the thing that people get confused about. And this is why I'm so grateful that Dr. Jonathan Wright wrote this book. He says in there, look, most of the time people are getting acid back up into the esophagus because that's not closing. And that's not closing because there's not enough stomach to trigger, or a stomach acid to trigger it to close. Totally different way of thinking about it. I invite you all to just get a copy of that book, read the first few chapters. I give everybody who's a new client here a copy of that book so that they can read it for themselves and learn the importance of having stomach acid as opposed to reaching out and taking a stomach acid stopping medication, which so many people do. And then that stops them from being able to extract minerals. If you don't have stomach acid, you can't get mineral extraction. Things like zinc, iron, calcium, also nutrients like B12 and folic acid. Without stomach acid, we can't pull these out of the food. So it is really important that we have that acid in the stomach. That's the way our bodies were designed. We make hydrochloric acid and pepsin so that we can then break these things down and receive these. Now, here's what's interesting. So many people think, well, I just need to, I'm low on iron, so I'm going to take an iron supplement. Well, you can't know that that iron supplement is going to work effectively unless you know that you have stomach acid to extract the iron. Same thing with zinc. So many people taking zinc supplements, calcium supplements. You have to make sure first that you actually have the stomach acid to extract those. So this is a very important thing that I always return to is you can't just correct things by throwing nutrition in the body. You have to make sure you have the stomach acid to get that nutrition out. Just a gentle reminder to everybody out there. And also, we have so many people taking probiotics. They're trying to change the environment in their colon, but they're forgetting that this stomach acid destroys pathogenic microbes. So if we don't want the bad bugs to get down into our colon or into our microbiome in our gut, we have to first make sure that there is a barrier that destroys the pathogens from getting in there. And that is another reason that stomach acid is so important. And another really important reason for stomach acid is that it triggers the release of bile. So what is bile? Bile is something that helps us break down another macronutrient. We just talked about protein as a macronutrient, one of the big pieces to give us the amino acids. Well, fatty acids are another macronutrient. We need our essential fatty acids. Every single one of those cells I talked about earlier that is replaced in the body, the 330 billion cells, has around it something called a phospholipid bilayer, lipid coming from the fat. And if we don't break down the fat, we don't get that ability to replace those cells. So these are essential fatty acids. Now, without fat, you also, or without the bile to break down the fat, you also have an impaired ability to utilize the fat soluble vitamins. So again, we got all these people taking vitamins A and D and E and K, but these are fat soluble. And there's a huge amount of people spending money on vitamin D. Are they getting the value out of it if they're not able to utilize a fat soluble vitamin? So I'm kind of going on a tour through the digestive tract, right? We hit the stomach first where we get the stomach acid. We pass through something called the pyloric sphincter into the duodenum. And in the duodenum, we get the liver producing bile for the gallbladder to squirt into that area. And then the pancreas also completes the breakdown of the proteins into amino acids. Okay, so what am I talking about here? As the food comes in, we have to completely break it down, again, into all those little pieces. I always say, think of like an IKEA furniture set. You go and you see it all assembled, but you can't take that and just throw it into your house, unfortunately. You have to get all the pieces and you have to assemble it. Your body takes in that couch, it breaks it down, and then it reassembles it somewhere else. And there's a lot of things that your body needs to reassemble it. Let me take this back to the thyroid and why this is appropriate to our thyroid discussion at this point. Now, without that stomach acid and without the bile, we may have an issue with the thyroid because, of course, the thyroid needs a lot of things to function. And there is an association between Hashimoto's and an inability for the body to have bile produced appropriately. In fact, in summary, research studies suggest that there's a significant association between clinical or subclinical hypothyroidism state and a development of common bile stones. So it's an association, but I'm going to get deeper into this just to give you an understanding. I'm trying to point out here that there is an important combination in supporting the gallbladder. Now, you may be going, oh, well, I don't have a gallbladder. A lot of people don't. That doesn't mean you can't support your body's ability to still produce bile. And that is a longer conversation, but I'm bringing this back to the importance of digestion and how that impacts the thyroid. And another study showing the association between thyroid function and gallstone disease. There is an association between thyroid and gallstone disease with a gender-specific relationship between hypothyroidism and this cholelithiasis, meaning, okay, if you have lost your gallbladder, unfortunately, which a lot of people have in this country, we have somewhere between 12 and 15,000 surgically removed gallbladders every week in this country. In fact, I know somebody today who just had theirs removed, unfortunately. This may be impairing your body's ability to do everything it needs to keep your thyroid functioning. So we have to learn what our liver needs to continue to produce that bile. And there are a lot of nutrients that are required in that. But just know, and if you have a question, just leave it in the comment below. I can tell you exactly what I would do to help support the liver to continue to do that. Because just because they call it a non-essential organ doesn't mean that it's not essential for your thyroid to function 100%. You have to have the bile to do that. So bile acids, particularly those produced in the liver, do play a crucial role in the conversion of T4 to T3 by facilitating the transport of T4 into the liver cells, which is the primary site for this conversion process, making bile essential for the study of T4 to T3 conversion in a biological context. A good way to explain this, it's very simplified, but I remember, I believe it was Dr. Gaeta who said this first, that T4 is kind of like Clark Kent, where T3 is kind of like Superman, right? One is not as doing as many things and the other one's doing a lot of things. And the place that they're converted the most, the favorite phone booth, is usually the liver. Now, it's not the only place, but that is the favorite place. So there is this liver connection, right? If we don't have a good working phone booth for them to make that conversion, we could have some issues with the thyroid. The liver is the main tissue responsible for converting T4 to T3. And in healthy human subjects with an adequate iodine intake, why do I bring it back to that? Let's be reminded in the first section, the main reason that people were having low thyroid in the first place is that they were living in an area where there wasn't iodine in the soil. We have to make sure that that iodine is there. Remember, T4 is 4 parts iodine. T3 is 3 parts iodine. And making that conversion is simply removing that iodine with an enzyme that is called deiodinase. So we're deiodinating these to make T3, to make the active form. Now, I point out this other pathways of thyroid hormone metabolism because it's important to note that there's many ways this gets metabolized. It's not just one route in the body. The body's incredibly complex. And there are processes in the body that would also be helpful in making sure that you don't have too much of these called glucuronidation and sulfation. So these are complex processes in the body that require a lot of chemistry. In fact, just for the deiodination to happen, we have to have complex chemistry. And this is where that selenium becomes super important to remember. In order for this enzyme to make that conversion to T4 to T3, selenium has to be in the picture. That is an essential nutrient. So it's not just iodine, it's not just tyrosine, but of course, we have to have selenium. It's an essential nutrient. And this could be one of the reasons that maybe everything is not quite in balance because you don't have enough to make this conversion. Now, there's a lot of places that these different enzymes are. There's D1, D2, and D3. I don't want to get too deep into this, but your body is doing all kinds of things to keep this in balance. And if we can support it, it can probably do it a lot better than us trying to force it to happen by throwing in an exogenous T4, right? And that's what that thyroid medication is. Sulfation is a primary step leading to the irreversible degradation of T4 to T3 by the D1. So we have to have a sulfation working. What do we need to sulfate? Tons of chemistry. So again, what if all of this that's showing up in a need for a thyroid medication or a synthetic T4 is actually the result of missing one of these nutrients because you can't sulfate appropriately to keep things in balance. So again, if you've been on thyroid medication, this is an opportunity for you to start examining. Have I been getting a diet that has given me ample magnesium and selenium and zinc and molybdenum and copper, B6? All of this is required. Now, not to overwhelm you, but what I'm saying is that instead of constantly replacing a hormone and not looking at what might be missing, if you don't have these things that may be missing, something else is going to go wrong in the body because you have to have it for all of these things. So use this as an opportunity to find whole foods that are going to be rich in these. And this is why, again, pumpkin seeds and nuts and seeds and beans, they are nature's multivitamin, and they provide all kinds of micronutrients. But back to the top with the stomach acid again, it's a reminder that we also need amino acids, which you cannot get without pepsin and stomach acid. In order for us to sulfate, we have to have sulfur-rich amino acids like cysteine and methionine. These are essential building blocks for sulfation and the synthesis of sulfated compounds. And you also need vitamin B. So just going to pause here because I know I'm kind of crazy, but what I'm going to just point out really quickly, all of this is irrelevant if we do not have stomach acid in the first place to break down the food that goes into the stomach to be able to give us all of these nutrients, the amino acids, essential fatty acids, the vitamins, and the minerals. So we always have to rule that out first. Is this all due to a lack of the stomach acid to break it down? Because you say, well, I am eating beans, I am eating nuts, I'm eating all these foods. Are you digesting it? That should be the first question when anything's going wrong in the body. Are you getting the nutrients you need to repair it? Because also, we have this other process called glucuronidation, which is, of course, very important as well for this whole process, not just the thyroid, but many things in the body. Detoxifying, especially garbage in the body, has to get out of the body. And in order for us to support our glucuronidation, we have to have a bunch of vitamins and minerals, magnesium and zinc, and again, copper, all of these likely suspects that are commonly, first of all, missing from the standard American diet. They're missing from a lot of people's diets. They're not eating whole foods. They're not getting those. And maybe if they are, we're not sure that they're fully digesting them. So we have to make sure that we have that stomach acid. I think I'm going to say that about 100 times in this. Okay, so let's assume that everything has worked perfectly. You have perfect stomach acid, you have bile, you have all the things, you've got that food in there, you've broken them all down. Now we have the final absorption of the majority of these nutrients taking place in what's called the jejunum. Now, the exceptions are, of course, B12 and iron. Now, I point this out to say, again, instead of just taking collagen, throwing it in your mouth and assuming that it gets down there, gets into the blood and goes and gives you collagen where you need it, it doesn't work like that. We break the collagen down into its little pieces, amino acids, then it gets into the jejunum, then it goes out where it builds it. So we have to make sure that we are breaking it all down so that we can get it into the bloodstream to where we need it to do the repairs. Let's talk about some reasons why that might not be working perfectly. Well, first of all, digestion starts in the mouth. And a lot of people aren't taking the time to chew their food. They are throwing food in their mouth and they're running out the door, or they're drinking a smoothie and they're not digesting it. They're trying to drink all their nutrients. You have to chew the food. This is part of the digestive process as much as you can. Well, at least if you don't, you're slowing down your body's ability to do all this perfectly. Also, drinking too much liquid with the meal. This is one that I always want to point out to people. That pH of 7 is what water is. If you put too much 7 in there, are you going to potentially push the pH too high in the stomach for pepsin to come out? Yes, we have to be very careful of over diluting the stomach acid with too much water. Genetically modified foods make it even harder. Anything that is not occurring in nature, when it goes into your body, which is part of nature, it's going to go, what is this and how do I deal with it? It's got to figure it out. Stress is one of the most important things. I want to remind people that if you are not in a state of rest and digest, you cannot digest. If you're in fight or flight, if you're in a hurry, if you're thinking about work, if you're working, if you're in some state where you are trying to get out of danger or get out of something, you are not able to digest. So this is a huge piece that people forget about. And I could definitely do a whole video on that specifically. But remember, if you're stressed, you're not digesting. People are not eating bitters. Bitters are very important about stimulating and help regulating your digestion. You have bitter receptors all throughout your body. In America, we need more bitters. A lot of people have a zinc deficiency. You need zinc to make stomach acid, and you need stomach acid to extract the zinc. So this is one thing to remember. If you're taking a zinc supplement, you might want to make sure that you're supporting your stomach acid while you're doing that. People with bacterial infections can suppress their stomach acid. And of course, people taking medications, taking proton pump inhibitors, acid stopping medications. These are all things that could be making it so that your body isn't able to break down all of these proteins and all of whatever you're eating to get the basic building blocks out of them. And we have a ton of people taking over-the-counter antacids, somewhere around almost 8 billion this year. It's projected to be. So there's so many people out there who are missing this really important piece of having stomach acid to break this down, because they're stopping it actively. Now, there is a time and a place in a very short-term period about what, to protect yourself, but these are not long-term solutions. And in fact, if you read the insert on these medications, you will read that it says these should be taken for 2 weeks, and then they should be stopped for 2 to 3 months. Check that out, because that is consistently what has been taught when in the insert with those medications. So if this isn't going perfectly, not only do we not break it down, we have undigested protein that gets into the jejunum. This is bad. This is a bull in a china shop. You've got the villi in the jejunum that are like the roots of the tree that pull in the nutrients into the bloodstream, but they get covered with something called chyme, partially digested chyme. So now we're blocking our body's ability to pull in the nutrients. And then also a fully formed protein, it should not be in there, right? This is a large undigested protein, not amino acids. Remember, it's a bunch of amino acids together makes a protein that can get into the blood. And what happens then, protein in the blood is bad. First of all, we blunt or we reduce our absorption because of that. And secondarily, we get something into the blood that our body will create an antibody against. This is what an allergy is. I want to remind everybody, allergies are to proteins in the blood. We have to have them completely broken down so they're not getting into the blood. And even worse than that, if we're not breaking them down, then we don't have the building blocks. So we can't replace and repair anything. We have to start with digestion when it comes to anything in the body, in my opinion. And specifically, if we're going to repair anything, we have to get these things broken down to essential amino acids. So this is where I go back to, if you want the T to make your own T4, tyrosine, first of all, you have to make sure you're eating protein so that it has either tyrosine or phenylalanine, but you have to have stomach acid and pepsin to make sure that you're getting it out of what you're eating. And so again, the question is, what if, because you have 8 different reasons that you don't have stomach acid, you just don't have enough T to make T4? I think that should at least be examined and ruled out for somebody who's been dealing with thyroid concerns for a very long time. Just make sure, first of all, you have that and that you have iodine. The same thing goes for these antidepressant medications. This is really important, and I'm going to talk about this because I'm never going to miss an opportunity to help people know that there is a massive nutrition component with depression and anxiety. And these medications actually inform us to that. If people have a good result with something called bupropion, it's because it's trying to keep these levels of norepinephrine and dopamine high. Well, what do you need to make these? You need tyrosine to make dopamine, which converts into norepinephrine, which again makes tyrosine doubly important. Think about this. If you have enough tyrosine to go around, but you only have enough to give a little bit to make dopamine and a little bit to make thyroid, you could be low dopamine and low thyroid at the same time. You cannot just make this magically appear out of thin air. There's this it's called consumption theory. Actually, I'm sorry, triage theory that says, look, if you only have enough to go around, your body's going to try to figure out how to keep you alive. But if you need 1,000 units of tyrosine every day, which is a hugely low estimation, but let's just say for argument's sake, for everything to function appropriately, but you only get 200 units in, or you only digest enough to get 200, something is not getting replaced and repaired in the body. And maybe, just maybe, what if the reason that these medications or the norepinephrine or the dopamine is low is because you just don't get enough tyrosine, or you're not digesting the protein to get that tyrosine in there. Same story with SSRIs. Serotonin, you cannot make serotonin without tryptophan. You cannot get tryptophan out of protein without pepsin. and stomach acid to break down that protein. So what if the reason that serotonin is low is simply due to low amounts of tryptophan? Now, I'm oversimplifying, but we have to go back to understand that you simply cannot make these without these essential amino acids. So the first thing we should always be looking at is, do I have enough amino acids to do any repair in the body? And all of you out there taking a melatonin supplementation, which I can't believe is actually legal in the United States. You need a prescription in other countries. This is made from serotonin. So again, if you don't have serotonin, how do you make melatonin? You can't. You have to have serotonin to make melatonin, and you have to have tryptophan to make serotonin, and you have to have stomach acid, and you have to have protein to get tryptophan. So this is why I just want to bring it back to making sure we're examining our digestion when it comes to anything in our body. And are we getting the nutrients in, and are we digesting them? Because even gluten, right? Gluten now, there's a lot more complicated with that. It's usually associated with chemicals like glyphosates, and there are GMO versions of it. And there are other chemicals that come with it. But remember, gluten is a protein. And oftentimes people will be eating gluten in a state of stress. They're stress eating. And if you're in fight or flight, you're in a state of stress, you don't have stomach acid. So the likelihood of that gluten getting into the blood, so your body has a response to it, an allergic or an autoimmune response to it, is heightened if you're eating things in a stressed state. Just remember that. So again, what if all of this is just the result of bad digestion? Here's the questions we should be asking if we're on a medication, and hopefully even before we go on that medication, because we're just masking the causes of basically malnutrition and malabsorption with a drug. And something is going to happen down the road if we don't get those essential pieces in there. So we have to make sure that we're getting it in there. Even though you may be on a medication and feeling better or getting that balance, we still have to look very closely at your digestion and your nutrition. So before you do anything else, are you sure that you can digest anything, including protein, properly? What is challenging your normal digestion? Are you eating in a hurry? Are you drinking too much? Are you skipping out on bitters? Are you not chewing the food? Do you have a zinc deficiency? Do you have an H. pylori infection? There's so many reasons why you may not be having your complete digestion happening. And what does the body need to make stomach acid? What does it need to be removed to help get it there, right? Do you have enough zinc to make your own stomach acid? These are the questions we should be asking. And again, what if is the final question I ask here. What if we are replacing things in the body with medications and we are ignoring a deficiency and a lack of digestion? What if we could actually correct that digestion, bring the nutrients in, and then maybe, just maybe, we may not need to continue to have to put something that has side effects in our body. Instead, we have some things that have side benefits, like nutrition, to heal the whole body. Thanks for hanging in there with me. I know that was a really quick and brief overview, but I wanted to just kind of give these reminders that we often, think about trying to heal the body, but we have to make sure that we're not only giving the body everything it needs to heal it, but we have to be able to digest it and understand that there are obstacles to that happening perfectly. And we have to be aware of whether or not those obstacles are in this individual before we can assume that they're going to be healed by nutrition. Thank you again for watching. Your comments are always welcome. And I know this wasn't done perfectly, but I do hope to continue to get better at these recorded ones where it's just me and the camera in here, feeling a little kind of, it's just weird to have a communication with somebody when they're not there. So I look forward to your comments to help continue the communication. And I'll continue this series as I have time to continue to record these. I hope you're finding this helpful, and I really look forward to your feedback. Have a great day.